Okay, so let's keep talking about this stuff. Um, so quoting. Quoting is massively important. You're going to be in college, a lot of college. College involves a lot of reading. You're going to read a lot of things. Talked about that last time. So you're going to read a lot of things in college. And then what your papers are going to consist of is, you're going to have an opinion, you're going to have a point you want to make, and to help you make your point, you're going to quote people. Sometimes it can feel like it's the other way around. Sometimes it can feel like your job is, your teacher's going to say, read this book and tell me what you think of the book. And your instinct is going to be to just tell them what the book's about. Really, your job is to tell me what you think about what the person's saying. So you're going to want to quote and discuss quotes. That's a huge part of your college experience. It's a big part of this class. Really, you're going to want to quote almost every paragraph. Almost every paragraph, you're going to have a quote in there, and you're going to discuss the quote. And so let's talk about how to do that. So for starters, you're going to want to quote. And by the way, you don't just have to quote. You can also put the quote in your own words, or you can summarize like a whole book quickly. You won't do that as much in my class, but you can. But here's a couple of things about this. So this is one of the most important things you're going to learn in the class. It's right here. Introduce the quote with who said it, why they matter, and where they said it. Every time you quote, well, not every time, but you got to say, the first time you quote something, you got to say who said it, why they matter, and where they said it. And this is something we'll get to later, but you're also going to want to put the page number after the quote in parentheses. We'll talk about that later. But here's an example of what I'm talking about. Ancient Greek philosopher Plato, in his book Phaedrus, writes, the madness of love is one of heaven's greatest blessings, unquote. And then you have page 8. Do you see what's going on here? That's the guy that wrote the book. That's the name of the book that he wrote. Why does this guy matter? Because he is an ancient Greek philosopher. You gotta do that in your papers. You can't just slap a quote down. You have to say the name of the guy that has the quote. You got to say the name of the thing he wrote it down in, like the name of the book or the name of the essay or the name of the poem or whatever. You say the name of the author, you say the name of the book, and you say why the person matters. Because maybe people have never heard of Plato. So you got to slap a little ancient Greek philosopher Plato writes his book Phaedrus, blah, 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 blah. And then you can put your quotation marks and put the quote. And I can talk more in more detail about that later because this is just like the first week of class. But the point, this is a really important thing to say, and there's a couple of things that are really worth stopping and discussing in here. Number one, you gotta put that information in so that it's very, very clear when you are saying what someone else would say. You got to be very clear. When is Plato talking and when are you talking? What are Plato's opinions and what are your opinions? The best way to do that is just say the name of the guy. Plato says blah, blah, blah. Plato, ancient Greek philosopher Plato says in this book, blah, 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 blah. Because I need to always be crystal clear. Oh, here's what Plato thinks. Here's what my student thinks. Oh, my student agrees with Plato. Fine. Or my student disagrees with Plato. Whatever. But you got to have the name of the person who did the quote. It's just so, or paraphrase, just so I'm always clear. Like, students have a tendency to write sentences like, war is bad. But is that your opinion, or are you telling me that's Plato's opinion? You got to have something like Plato says war is bad, or whatever it is, to distinguish. The other thing, too, is that ancient Greek philosopher bit, where you say ancient Greek philosopher Plato writes in his book Phaedrus, and then you put the quote. That description of Plato is actually surprisingly important. That description is why he matters. You can't just write in your paper, Frank says blah, 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 because I don't know who Frank is. Is Frank some like weird guy that lives in your apartment building? And I don't know, can I trust that guy? Is that guy an expert? Does that guy know what he's doing? Is he worth quoting in a college paper? And we'll get to that later. That's a later lesson about who's worth quoting in a college paper. But the point is, you have to slap something in front of the person's name so that you can be clear, is this person worth mentioning in a college paper? Now, when I give you somebody like Plato, or your teacher gives you a book, that's worth quoting. They gave it to you, so it must be worth quoting. Later on, when you have to find your own books and your own essays to read and discuss, you're going to have to decide if they're worth quoting in a college paper. And we'll talk about how you can tell. The point is you're going to need, and there's a whole system for how you can tell if someone's worth quoting. But once you found someone worth quoting, you got to tell the reader. The person reading your essay needs to know if this person is worth quoting. Good. Okay. There is another aspect to this. This is one of those college orientation moments. This is a weird thing that most teachers will not tell you, and I'm here to tell you a weird little college secret. They don't keep the secret to be mean. They keep it secret because they don't realize it is a secret, but it confuses the shit out of students unless someone says it out loud, and most people never say it out loud. It's a funny thing. I'm going to give you the book by Plato. You have it. You can download it right now on the website. And you're going to quote Plato and discuss him. And what you're going to have an instinct to do is say something like, Plato says blah, 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 blah. And you're not going to put that he's an ancient Greek philosopher. Why not? Because you're like, Professor Clock knows he's an ancient Greek philosopher. I don't have to say this. He knows who I'm talking about. And I do. I do know Plato is an ancient Greek philosopher. I also know that the book I gave you is called the Phaedrus. So you might think, I don't need to put ancient Greek philosopher for Professor Clock. I don't have to put Phaedrus. He knows the book. He gave us the book. Maybe I don't even need to know who said this quote because he knows the quote. He taught it to us. And this is one of those weird college things that doesn't make any sense to anybody. But you do need to do it. Here it is. Here's the secret. When you write your papers, you gotta write them so that you could hand them to a stranger on the street and they could read it and understand it. So you cannot start your paper with, on page 2, because page 2, what? They don't have the book. And you can't start with, like, Plato says this. You're going to have to explain who Plato is and why he matters. And also, here's the thing. We've all read the book. We're going to read the book together, and then our whole class is going to know the book really well. But you have to write your essay pretending, because I'm going to read your essay. I know Plato really well. You wrote the essay. You know Plato really well. But you got to write the essay so a stranger who doesn't even know who Plato is could read it. It seems stupid because in your mind, the reason you're writing these essays is because I am making you, and the person reading the essays is me. But what makes it tricky is the college is trying to train you to explain yourself in the outside world. And so always, when you write your essays, you've got to write them as if you're explaining yourself to someone in the outside world, which feels weird because you are not planning on showing these essays to anyone but me. You will probably burn them when the semester is over, and no one will ever see them but me. But still, it's a weird game you play in college because in your mind, college is about passing individual classes by doing what the professor tells you to do. But that's actually not the point of college. College is supposed to prepare you for situations out there in the world, which means you got to write your papers as if they're being aimed at people over there, people who don't know who Plato is, which means you got to explain things. So for example, in the middle of Plato's Phaedrus, Socrates gives a speech about why love is good. You're going to have to explain in your paper why he's doing that, because you have to sort of summarize the section of Plato that you're writing about, because you got to assume that some random guy on the street, he hasn't read Plato, which means you got to explain it to him. On the one hand, this is bad news for you because it's fucking annoying. But on the other hand, it's good news for you because students often have a hard time figuring out, how am I going to write so many pages? I tried it. My professor wants a 3-page paper and I could only write 1 page. Well, one of the reasons why you're only writing 1 page is because you're skipping a lot of basic stuff you have to explain to the reader because you don't think that needs to be explained to me. And you're right, it doesn't. But you need to write your papers as if they're for someone else in the outside world, which means you got to tell me who Plato is, what the hell this book is about, why it matters, what's going on with the quote, what's the situation around the quote. So you got to explain it to somebody who's never read Plato or whatever it is you're doing in college. You got to imagine showing it to someone who is not taking the class. And it's a weird thing to wrap your head around, but it's one of those things you got to know how to do in college. Okay, cool. That's video number 2. And there's 4 more to go today.